Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. The contest for politico-military space between the Taliban and the Kabul government continues, generating high levels of violence. Taliban have rapidly gained territory in recent months as U.S. forces complete their withdrawal after 20 years of military and stabilization operations in that country. Intense fighting is raging in Helmand, including in and around Lashkar Gah, the provincial capital. Helmand was the centerpiece of the US and British military campaign. Observers say Taliban gains there would be a blow for the Afghan government. Lashkar Gah is one of three provincial capitals under intense attack. The other two are Kandahar and Herat. Afghan security forces, already stretched and stressed, are now focused on defending key strategic areas, including provincial capitals. Meanwhile, the government is facing criticism for constraining access of journalists to these areas. A few days ago, 4 Afghan journalists were arrested on the orders of the National Directorate of Security, the premier Afghan intelligence agency, for reporting from Kandahar, close to Spin Boldak, the town/border crossing that fell to the Taliban. Pakistan, which had planned a conference in Islamabad of key Afghan political figures from both the government and the political opposition, has dropped the idea after President Ashraf Ghani of Afghanistan objected to it. Efforts continue apace for a political settlement, but events on the ground seem to be overtaking diplomacy. To discuss the situation further, I'm joined by Sahra Karimi, an Afghan film director and the first female chairperson of the Afghan Film Organization, Ali M. Latifi, a freelance journalist based in Kabul, and Dr. Carl Carlton-Taylor, professor of political science and director of the Center for Intelligence and Security Studies at the University of Akron. Let me begin with Ms. Karimi here. Ms. Karimi, you had come to Afghanistan. You've trained men and women in the art of filmmaking. You have headed, as I said, the film organization. This is a lot of work. This is very important work. Do you have a sense that this might come to naught in the event of further violence, in the unfortunate event of a civil war?
I myself deeply believe that Taliban wouldn't be able to take all power, and I think they try, but they are not going to be success in to take power, to take many provinces or maybe also big cities, but now our Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior Affairs, and also there are free movement of people who are fighting against Taliban. And our president yesterday, he announced that he clearly announced his opinion. So people they hate Taliban, and people really they don't want Taliban. And my generation, that young generation, we don't want Taliban. We don't want anything with them because we know them. And today is not like 90s that people they didn't have access to information or to technology, so we didn't know Taliban. They didn't know Taliban, and it was unknown group. Today we, through technology and sharing information and barbaric actions and barbaric things that they are doing against women, children, and against people of Afghanistan, we know them and we don't want them. But I think now everybody, all political groups, all civil society groups, people, normal people, political people, also government, everybody, they want to be united to fight against Taliban.
Okay. I will get to the security side of the issue, but I just want to go back to your own background. I believe you were born in Tehran, and then you studied in the Czech Republic, Czechia now, and the Slovak Republic. As a matter of fact, that's where Bratislava, where you did your, you got your degree in filmmaking. And then you came to Afghanistan in 2012. Now, it seems to me, and from what you have just said also, it seems to me that you are quite firm in your belief that Afghanistan, after the US NATO troop withdrawal, will emerge as a modern progressive country. Now, am I correct in assuming this?
Yes, of course, because I know my generation, and we are not like our fathers, and we are not our old generation. We are a modern. My generation is modern generation. We are well informed, and we know about our rights, and we have experience of living outside of Afghanistan. Many people, many young people like me, just returned to Afghanistan, and they are working. I am leading one of the like more important film institution in this country, and I do my work. So it means that when there is a peace and when there is a stability, when there is no this war that they are pushing us to this war, we are doing our job. At least in film industry and filmmaking, we are doing our job.
Right.
But this is unfortunately, this war is something that we didn't want it, we didn't invent it, but somebody else from outside pushing that Afghanistan should be involved. But my generation wouldn't let it, you know.
Okay, right. Let me, since you talked about belonging to the younger generation, I also have, as I said, Ali Latifi, who's a young Afghan journalist. Mr. Latifi, you heard what Ms. Karimi had to say. Give me your sense of how you analyze the current Taliban advances and the surging violence and the counter attacks by the Afghan security forces. Where do you think the situation is headed?
You know, Dr. Karimi made a good point. She said, this is a war that's coming from the outside to us. The government keeps referring to it as an imposed war. And that's something, that's something that we have to address. That's something that, the entire world has been in Afghanistan for 20 years now. 40 countries have been in Afghanistan, the United Nations, NATO, all of these massive global organizations and all of these world powers have been here for 20 years. But we've proven time and time again that this war is coming from beyond Afghanistan. It's coming from across the Durand line. It's coming from Pakistan. It's coming from Iran. So again, if we really want to address the root cause of this war, we need to go where it is, to the west and to the south of Afghanistan.
I had a sense that, one or two of my panelists are going to raise this point, which is why, frankly, I wanted to have a Pakistani analyst on the panel, because as a moderator, it's difficult for me to, sort of counter these allegations. But since the program is meant for you to express your view, let me just say, before I go to Dr. Carlton Theller, that some of these points were also raised by your president in a recent conference. And the Prime Minister of Pakistan set aside his text and responded to these. Pakistan has responded to these allegations for a very long time. And it's quite clear that if there is further violence in Afghanistan, Pakistan will be the country that will suffer the major consequences and spillover of the refugees and terrorism and the rest of it. And of course, we have given coordinates of all the terrorist groups that are in the ungoverned spaces. But as I said, I don't want to belabor this point as a moderator, but let me get to Dr. Carlton Theller here. So Dr. Carlton Theller, leaving aside the bickering that goes on and the fact that an internationally recognized border is constantly referred to by the Afghans as Durand Line, leaving that aside, President Ghani yesterday came on record as saying that we are facing this because of the precipitous withdrawal of US and NATO troops. Ironically, when he inaugurated the Khost airport, there he said that he had managed to get the US troops out of Afghanistan. So obviously, that was something that he said for domestic consumption. Now, the US troops were already at best doing a holding operation in military terms. And by 31st August, they will all be gone. So give me your assessment of where do you think the situation would be headed, keeping in mind what's going on the ground?
My assessment is fairly pessimistic for the stability of Afghanistan, unfortunately. I don't see the country having a successful reconciliation or peace process. I think the Taliban are making very serious gains on the ground. They don't have an incentive to really work on peace and reconciliation. I see a real drop in the morale of Afghan forces. And I see signs now that there's real desperation in Afghan government circles. So my overall view is that Kabul will probably not fall within the next 6 months, but it's in serious danger within the next year. I think some of these provincial capitals will fall. It will be tougher for the Taliban to take those and hold them. Those will be the toughest nuts to crack, so to speak. But unfortunately, Afghanistan, at the best, will be a fractured country where most of the territory will be controlled by the Taliban within 6 months. Probably not the entire country, but the Afghan government's control over territory is slipping by the day. To a great degree, it depended on the United States and NATO forces to give it the support necessary to hold the Taliban at bay. And now that those forces are gone, it's really struggling.
Right. So there have been some mixed signals from the U.S. with reference to post-withdrawal air support by the United States. Is that something you think is feasible in terms of even if the fighter jets fly from an aircraft carrier in the Gulf, it will still be, considering that it can't fly over Iran, it's going to be an expensive operation, air-to-air fueling, it'll be pretty costly and so on. So is that something you think is realistic?
Well, I'll tell you how I look at this. I think that there's been some disagreement between politicians and the military and the intelligence community in the United States. The military and intelligence community, from my view, this is an unofficial view, is that without American air support, the Afghan security forces are in serious trouble. And so there's been pressure put by them on the political leadership in the United States to say, look, we need to have some kind of air support in the area to avoid catastrophic losses. For example, Kandahar City or places that are very important strategically and very important for morale. Some of these big cities go to the Taliban. You could see a collapse in morale in Afghanistan that could really be kind of a cascading problem where Afghan forces just give up. So you're right, though. It is very difficult to carry out these so-called over-the-horizon operations. This has been a discussion in the United States for literally decades now, as if you pull forces out of Afghanistan, how do you support the Afghan army? It does not have the air capacity to hold off the Taliban the way U.S. and NATO air forces were able to. So it will be expensive, but I think that there will be continuing pressure to keep air support in theater so that you don't see these kind of staggering losses by the Afghan security forces.
Right. Final question, Dr. Carson-Seller. Leaving aside the allegations that I was talking about, the fact is that the regional countries are in coordination. None of them can afford a spillover. So obviously, Pakistan has fenced the border in large part. The Iranians are also obviously not going to allow a spillover. CESTO, which is the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the Russians and the Stans, by all accounts, the Uzbek and the Russian troops are doing border drills. along the Uzbek and Afghan border. Do you believe that perhaps there needs to be a framework of regional powers and the United States for a post-withdrawal spillover kind of situation where regional countries will have to, do some heavy lifting now that the U.S. troops will be gone?
Well, I think it's one of those cases of be careful what you wish for, in the sense that I think some countries in the region are very happy to see the United States leave because they consider the United States a threat to their interests. At the same time, the consequences of Afghanistan falling apart into instability and conflict is bad for them. And so we're starting to see this scramble now to deal with the consequences of Afghanistan starting to fall apart. To have some kind of grand regional coordination to deal with this problem, I think is probably not going to happen, despite the fact that many of these countries want to keep their borders safe, secure, not have spillover effects. You've got multiple countries with different interests. The one thing that they agree on is that they want the United States out. What they don't agree on is what they want the Afghanistan to turn into.
Right.
And they have different attitudes towards the Taliban, for example. So I don't think you're going to see some kind of a grand coalition of countries coming together to somehow keep Afghanistan from becoming a big regional problem.
Let's see. That's something that would be worth keeping an eye on. But thank you so much. That was Dr. Carlton Teller speaking with us. Before I wrap up, let me go back to Ms. Karimi. Ms. Karimi, quickly. So the prognosis that Dr. Carlton Teller has presented is not very optimistic. I believe would you review your optimism about the situation, or would you stick to your optimism that this thing will resolve itself in favor of a progressive Afghanistan?
No, because I'm not a political person, so I don't see from a political perspective to the issue, to hold this issue. I am artist and I see from artistic issue. Political person or political people who analyze like politics or those things, they know more about more detail, political details, and about games and everything. But what I think from my perspective as an artist and as a filmmaker, I think USA decided everything started with that peace or deal that they signed with the Taliban. So this deal or this this deal it gave Taliban kind of confident that they think, okay, they can do whatever they can. So this was very it wasn't very like
you mean to say that it wasn't responsible of the United States to make that deal?
Yeah, it wasn't responsible from US side. Okay, but we know when we are not anymore child, at least my generation, we know that nobody take care of, they don't care about Afghanistan and about Afghanistan issue. Everybody who came to Afghanistan and to did some business, any kind of business, developing, I don't know, economical, cultural, whatever, they did it because they had in their agenda. So staying in Afghanistan forever wasn't in their agenda, and I think there is new agenda that USA, I think they're trying to create or trying to do, to implement. So for now they left us. Okay, but I believe in my people, and I believe in my, maybe
that's a great thing to say.
Our neighbor.
That's a great thing to say. Unfortunately, I have to wrap up, and I need to give a couple of minutes to Ali Latifi also before I wrap up. Mr. Latifi, do you agree with Dr. Carlton Teller's assessment of the Taliban advances and the sort of demoralization of the Afghan National Security Forces? Or do you think that the new strategy of focusing on strategic locations and defending them is something that's likely to bear fruit?
I think we have to put these territorial back and forths into perspective. Unfortunately, for the last 20 years, districts have fallen and traded hands between the two sides this entire time. In the past, it took much longer. It took weeks or months or years for these things to happen. Now it's happening in a matter of days. But what's happening is that people are increasingly getting more, their morale is being increased. If you look at what happened in Herat, the fact that, the Taliban were repelled and were unable to take the city, that really, in the lead up to that, in the last couple of weeks, the morale in Herat was really down. People were afraid to go out. The markets were quiet. But seeing that their people, including their uprising forces, were able to stand up to the Taliban, it had an impact. We were seeing last night.
That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just fast-pacing it because I'm running out of time. But I wanted to get your view on reports that there are a number of districts that have fallen, especially in the northeast and northwest, where the Taliban have actually, rather than fighting, have actually made deals with the local sort of elders, the Mashran. Is that correct?
There are reports of that, for sure. And I think you have to remember that in a lot of those instances, it comes down to the fact of, do you want another war? Do you want more fighting? Or can you speak to them in a way where you can somehow get something in return, where you can get some kind of a safety, where you can get some kind of a promise? Now, if you look at what's happening in Kandahar and what's happening in Helmand, they aren't living up to those promises. But you do have, say, a province like Badghis, where there was a ceasefire established shortly after the Taliban tried to take the provincial capital. So the people are certainly, if they feel that their security forces are overstretched, the people are trying to do as much as they can in areas where they can. And this is where we're seeing things like that in Badghis. We're seeing things like that in terms of these uprising movements. We're seeing things like that in terms of what's been going on in Herat and what will be happening in Kabul tonight.
Right.
It's really awakened the people in a lot of ways.
It's a pleasure with you, Mr. Latifi. I'll definitely have you back on my program. Right now, I've just run out of time, so thank you so much to you and to Ms. Sahra Karimi for her insights. We shall take a short break and return to discuss India's continuing policy of undermining Pakistan cricket, mixing its toxic politics with the sport. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Successive Indian governments have influenced the Board of Control for Cricket in India to get the BCCI to refuse to play bilateral cricket series with Pakistan inside or outside Pakistan. In 2020, the BCCI managed to deprive Pakistan of its bid to host the Asia Cup. Now, India is bringing its toxic politics to try and nip the Azad Kashmir Premier League in the bud. Famous South African cricket star Herschel Gibbs took to Twitter on 31st July and wrote, and I'm quoting from what he tweeted, completely unnecessary of the @BCCI to bring the political agenda with Pakistan into the equation and trying to prevent me playing in the @KPL 20, also threatening me, saying they won't allow me entry into India for any cricket-related work. Ludicrous. On Monday, former England spinner Monty Panesar pulled out of the Kashmir Premier League 2021, citing political pressure and advice from the Board of Control for Cricket in India. Panesar said that BCCI has told all cricketers who participate in the Kashmir tournament that they would not be allowed to play in India in the future. To discuss this further, I'm by Najm Sethi, ex-chairman, Pakistan Cricket Board, and founder of Pakistan Super League, who has dealt with BCCI and ICC, and Gaur Gilani, eminent Kashmiri journalist and author of Kashmir, Rage and Reason, Mr. Gilani is also a keen observer of subcontinental and international cricket. Let me begin with Mr. Sethi. Najam, so you have headed PCB, you have founded the PSL, and understand administration and diplomacy. You've been a former caretaker Chief Minister of Punjab, as well as a former caretaker Federal Minister. So walk us first through how this works. We have many viewers from non-cricket playing countries, so it'll be good to get an overview of how national boards work and what is their nexus with International Cricket Council. We will then get to India and its role in trying to undermine cricket in Pakistan. So over to Najam.
Well, very briefly, the ICC is a private body. It's not supposed to be linked to any government. And it is private members. And all the cricket playing countries, most of them are members. Some are full members, some are affiliates. So the situation is that the ICC has 10 or 12 member boards, which are staffed with full members. Pakistan is a full member, India is a full member, Sri Lanka, and so on. In recent times, three big countries, cricket playing countries, Australia, England, and India, have basically dominated the ICC. And together they have basically made all its rules, taken all its decisions, and parceled out all its contracts to the commercial sectors. Beyond that, what is interesting is that India is the most lucrative cricket playing country in the world. It has huge audiences, it has huge funds, and is able to contribute possibly the largest chunk of revenues to the ICC kitty. By that criterion, India ends up with a very dominating position in the ICC. Having said that, in recent times, we've had an Indian chairman of the ICC. Now we also have an Indian managing director of the ICC. We have an Indian media director of the ICC, and so on. We also have an affiliate member from an international, multinational, who's also of Indian origin, and so on. Now, given this situation, India is able to basically have its way in the ICC. Now, given Pakistan and India's problems, India has been reluctant to play Pakistan for political reasons. In theory, the BCCI is a private body. It should not be listening to the government of India. The theory is that if you're a private body, these are commercial contracts, you honor your commercial contracts. But unfortunately, the situation is a little different on the ground. On the ground, we have several members of the ICC who are not private bodies, who are actually boards of cricket or control of cricket established by post-colonial governments like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, and so on. So you have a bit of a mixed bag. The ICC constitution says that we should not be influenced by government policy, regardless of whether we are, in a sense, beholden to the government or not in any way. But the actual fact of the matter is that no board, whichever board it may be, can really ignore the advice of its government or its foreign office on matters that pertain to cricket, whether it's touring teams or whether it is safety and security and so on and so forth. And I say this with full confidence, no board, not the English board, not the cricket board of Australia, not the Indian board, certainly not the Pakistan board and the other boards that are linked to official government notifications. Now, in that situation, India has always said, the BCCI has always said in theory, that they're ready to play Pakistan, but they need government permission. And although government permission is not officially sanctioned under their constitutions, this is the hard reality. And what happens is that the Indian government, and maybe at times perhaps even the Pakistani government, have basically ordered their cricket boards to do this or not to do that, especially as regards bilateral cricket between India and Pakistan. So that's the situation. In this current situation, the Indian government must have advised the BCCI that this league should not be encouraged. They possibly think that the Kashmir League will be a tool to promote Kashmiri interests, which the Indian government does not wish to promote. And for that reason, the BCCI has now approached Indian foreign players not to participate in it. I just want to conclude by saying that my sense is that in the past, such things were done behind the scenes. No official statements were made to this effect. Quiet pressure was brought to bear on people to do things or not to do things, but never as a matter of policy. In this case, I think it began with officially the BCCI telling foreign players that if you play in the Kashmir League, you will not be able to enter India or play in India or work in India. And now I think they have officially written to the ICC to say that Kashmir is disputed territory. It cannot have a Kashmir team. We have an equal claim on such a thing, and we have not done it. And they want to make propaganda out of this. So that's the sort of case they're going to build before the ICC. Our case is going to be that this is an internal matter for PCB and for Pakistan. We are not infringing on any international rules or regulations. There's nothing in the ICC statutes that forbids us from authorizing a league such as the Kashmir Premier League.
Right. Great overview. So I remember that you were heading PCB when you took this issue to the ICC with reference to India not honoring the contracts and not playing Pakistan bilaterally. So can you just sort of recap what happened there and what was the ICC's decision?
Yes, in 2014, the BCCI agreed with the PCB to resume bilateral cricket. And we signed on a contract for the next 3 or 5 years, I think it was, to play a lot of matches between Pakistan and India. This is very important because a lot of the revenue for both cricket boards comes from these extraordinary matches, which fuel a lot of excitement and passion, and by that same criterion, a lot of commercial interest. But then what happened is that when the time came close to playing those matches, the BCCI suddenly balked. It backed out, citing the government's pressure not to play these matches. By that time, when the contract was signed, India-Pakistan relations were good. Then a new government came into India, and by the time the matches came to be played, the BJP had already decided that they were not going to allow Pakistan and India to play. So we took the matter to the court, the ICC's Court of Appeals. And we said, we have a contract and India needs to honor this contract. India was not able to produce any evidence that the government had pressurized, the BCCI was not able to produce any evidence that the government had pressurized the BCCI not to play Pakistan, i.e. evidence that could be recorded, i.e. written evidence that there was a policy decision. But the BCCI did say that implicitly we'd been advised. The BCCI brought a witness, an ex-foreign minister of India, to vouch for them that without government permission they could not play. And it didn't really matter whether or not it was in writing or not, as long as the BCCI said that was the case, that was the case. The Indian government, in the meanwhile, was mum about it, didn't say a word. The ICC judicial panel held that the BCCI was within its rights not to play because of the government had said don't play Pakistan. So that's the way the cookie has crumbled.
Right. Is there any way out of this? Like, so if even the ICC cannot really be the honest broker, the courts of appeal, then what options does Pakistan, or for that matter, any other cricket board has in the event of this kind of dispute?
If there is a dispute between two boards, the ICC is very happy to mediate the dispute, provided there are no government interventions on either side. If there are government interventions, and either board can cite government intervention or government advice or policy, the ICC says this, hands up, this is between the two of you, you sort it out. And you can't sort it out because one or both are saying different things.
Okay. Thank you so much, Najam Sethi, giving us his insights into how this thing works. Gaur Gilani, you heard Najam. It's interesting that the BCCI was not producing any written evidence in front of the ICC, and yet India, because of the reasons that Najam just cited, a huge market, the way it dominates the ICC, manages to, actually influence the outcomes. So give me your view of this Indian reaction to the Kashmir Premier League.
Well, Mr. Haider, I listened to what Mr. Sethi had to say, and I largely agree with his kind of analysis of the whole situation, because he's someone who has been closely linked with such cricketing affairs. But I think for both India and Pakistan, the issue of Kashmir has been very, very sensitive. And, we have seen in the past also that whenever it comes to Kashmir, both countries behave in a certain expected manner. So I don't see this, this was quite expected, the kind of reaction that we saw from the BCCI. And let's also not forget the fact that the current secretary of the BCCI happens to be the son of the current Indian Union Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah. So you don't need a written order in that case. I mean, there are certain orders which are written, and there are other orders which are unwritten. There are unwritten rules in such engagements. And I want to go a little back to 2008 when the Mumbai attacks happened. I think, before that, when the first edition of the IPL, Indian Premier League, the lucrative and cash-rich league started, there were Pakistani players also playing. And if I remember correctly, there was Suhail Tanvir, who actually was the highest wicket taker in the tournament. And after the Mumbai attacks, the thing happened in the previous government, which was the UPA, United Progressive Alliance, led by Mr. Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And since then, no Pakistani player has actually participated in the IPL. So, and the last series was, I think, 2012, 2013, when the weak Pakistani side, led by Misbahul Haq, actually beat India 2-1. The first game was played, I think, in Chennai, and the second one in Kolkata in Eden Gardens, and the third one in Delhi, which the name of the stadium is now changed from Feroz Shah Kotla. And that stadium also was actually, the cricket ground was, the Delhi Cricket Association was led by former Minister of the BJP, Mr. Jaitley. Now his son heads that. So it's like, we actually say that these bodies are apolitical or private bodies, but there is a lot of political influence when it comes to governing and when it comes to, heading these bodies. So I can name n number of stadiums and n number of cricket associations in India, including the current Union Sports Minister, Mr. Anurag Thakur, who is a BJP member. And he was actually heading the Cricket Association in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. So there's a lot of political connection in the boards, and I think it's across the board. Even in Pakistan, I don't know much about Pakistan, how it functions, but I think there is a lot of political influence always with respect to how cricketing affairs are run. But coming back to the Kashmir Premier League, I think there's a Kashmiri team, J&K Jammu and Kashmir team, which also plays in the Indian domestic Ranji Trophy. And we have seen and that is part of the BCCI. I don't remember that Pakistan has, raised any objection to these domestic cricketing structure in India, where Jammu and Kashmir, because Pakistan also has a claim that J&K is a disputed territory. So they have never raised this issue that why is Jammu and Kashmir team being played in the Indian domestic, cricketing calendar. So number two is, I think, because some players from the international teams, some retired cricketers like Herschel Gibbs and Monty Panesar and others who were scheduled to play in the Kashmir Premier League, and it's actually being held in Muzaffarabad, and where the teams have also been named after the cities in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. I think with the current government, which is in charge since May 2014, with the Hindutva mindset, I think it was all expected that they will raise certain objections. And I think kind of how international relations work, where economic relations play an important role rather than morality or other arguments. So it's same in cricket also, BCCI being the richest board and having a sort of influence over the ICCI also. I think it was all on the expected lines.
Right. So the idea that, sports should be free of politics is, of course, an ideal. It doesn't really exist in this world, and certainly not between India and Pakistan. So, so your sense is, Mr. Gilani, that India would try and, as I said in my opening, nip the Kashmir Premier League in the bud by actually threatening foreign cricketers in terms of not being able to play in the IPL or not, allowed entry into India for cricket-related work and the rest of it. So to have Herschel Gibbs, as I said in my opening, I read out from his tweet, he hasn't mentioned whether he's pulling back, but Panessa has said that he has pulled out. And there's a likelihood that other foreign players might also follow suit.
See, Mr. Heather, you have to understand that at one point in time, I think Shahid Afridi was in India, and there was a match being played in Mohali, where he also, there were a lot of Kashmiris in the crowd who were cheering for Pakistan, obviously. And then he made a statement while during a presentation ceremony, and that became a huge political issue because Afridi had said something about Kashmir. And it's always been the case, whenever Kashmir is raised by any cricketer, and there have been a lot of bickerings and a lot of, verbal spats on Twitter between Pakistani and Indian cricketers. I remember between Sehwag and Shoaib Akhtar, between Gautam Gambhir and Afridi, and the rest. So I think, yes, you're right. I mean, BCCI will do whatever it can to stop this Kashmir Premier League because it's very sensitive matter for them. And especially if you remember that there's a parliamentary resolution passed by the Indian Parliament with regards to its claim over Pakistan-administered Kashmir and even Gilgit-Baltistan. So they claim the they have a full claim on the entire territory. So in that sense, they have raised this issue that this being a disputed territory, Pakistan cannot hold such leagues. But setting aside these arguments, I think it's because of the might, it's because of the economic might that BCCI has, that it can get away with many things. And similarly, I think Pakistan is not able to raise such issues because of its stature in the ICCI and because of its, lack of political will and lack of political spine, so to speak, because then Pakistan can also have many arguments, why Jammu and Kashmir team is part of the Indian Ranji system. I have never seen such a statement from the Pakistani side.
Right. Thank you so much. That was Gaur Gilani speaking with us on this issue. Clearly, there's a lot of toxicity, as I said in my opening, with reference to right-wing RSS-dominated Indian government, and which will try its best. And the Indian claim on Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, areas that were liberated through force of arms by the indigenous population of both Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, is an area that India can lay claim to in its fantasy, but that's a claim that is roundly rejected by the populations of Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir. This is all from In Focus this evening. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.